Jordan Aspen here, and I'm going to be showing you the 5 things that you need in order to start learning how to sew. And guess what? This is not one of them. We will talk about this and a couple of other potential tools that you can use to level up your skills after you've used these first 5 tools to experiment. See, I want you to figure out whether you actually like sewing or whether you just like the idea of sewing before you invest in a larger tool. Both invest the money and the time it takes to learn how to use a complicated machine like a sewing machine. So, the first 5 things that you need, I'm going to dive into first, and then stay till the end of the video for some level up tips. Now, the first few items you probably already have around your house, so good news, not even spending any money right now. The first item is a ruler. Now, I'm sure you've seen fancy seam gauge rulers or measuring tapes or things if you like to watch YouTube and like to see people sewing. However, they're really not necessary, especially at this stage, and especially if you're not exactly sure how to use the little bells and whistles that they might include. What's going to serve you best is a basic yardstick or a 12-inch ruler like an elementary student uses in school. You want something very basic that has measuring marks and a straight edge. That's all you really need. Just like the first item, the second item is probably one that you have a version of in your home. Now, you probably have heard stories of fancy sewing scissors and how important it is to only use them on fabric. And you may even know somebody who got into big trouble using sewing scissors for anything but fabric. That's one reason that I recommend not starting out by going and getting a fancy pair of sewing scissors, but rather just finding a pair of scissors that you already own or that you can find very easily at just about any store that you go to. It doesn't have to be a special sewing store. I recommend you find a pair of scissors that is just sharp enough to cut fabric. Yes, later you're going to want to get those special sewing scissors that you only use on fabric and nobody else is allowed to touch because they are going to cut with much more precision and they're not going to catch on your finer fabrics. And that's really important, but not at the beginning. At the beginning, all you need is a pair of scissors that will cut through fabric and not be overly frustrating. So you can get a basic pair of Fiskars from Amazon or Target or just about anywhere that you would buy a pair of scissors if you need a new pair, if all the pairs in your house are too dull to cut fabric. The next item, I would be willing to venture a bet that you have this at home too, even though you might not be thinking about it. The next item is fabric. Now, you might look at this and say, I don't have fabric like that lying around, scraps or yardage or anything. I don't have fabric, but you probably do. You might not have something like this, but you probably have something like this, right? So what I recommend is starting with a linen or cotton woven fabric, very typical of a button-down shirt. So this is one that I got from the thrift store. You might be able to get your grandpa's old shirt, for example, upcycle that and have some memories. You're very likely to have a woven fabric available to you, whether it's an old pillowcase or an old shirt or something like that, or get it very cheaply at a thrift store. Something like this shirt, it's got short sleeves, so there's not a ton of fabric here. However, there's plenty of fabric in here to make a couple of small projects like the one in my Simple Sewing Skills book, which will be linked below in the description. It's free and you can download that and learn all the basic skills, and all you need is these 5 items in order to start. And so I recommend a woven fabric. And that's one that doesn't stretch. So when you're testing your fabric to see if it's a good starter material, try and stretch it. And if it has very little stretch in any direction, you're probably good to go. You're looking for a woven fabric, not a t-shirt. So you don't want a t-shirt because a t-shirt has stretch in at least one direction. And the problem with stretch is that it adds another variable. So when you're a beginner, it's easier to work with a fabric that works a little more like paper and doesn't move and stretch on you than to use a fabric that is stretchy and just has other qualities that you have to keep in mind while you're sewing. Using a woven fabric like this one is simple because it removes a variable. it acts a little bit more like paper, so you can fold it and stitch it, and it's just much more straightforward. So highly recommend you start with something like this. A pillowcase is going to give you plenty of fabric to make multiple versions of the project in the Simple Sewing Skills book or other projects that you can find online. We have just 2 items left on our list, and chances are if you or someone in your house does not sew, you probably don't have these on hand. Maybe you have a mending kit or something, so you might, but these are likely the couple of items that you might need to go out and purchase. The first one is hand sewing needles. I recommend buying a multi-pack of some sort. This isn't the best example, but this is the one that I have right now. And you can see that it has different size needles, different lengths. The size of the eyes are different sizes. Some of them are smaller, some of them are bigger. And what getting a variety pack of hand sewing needles lets you do is have different needles on hand to experiment with. Needles are very inexpensive, and so it's one of those things that you can start experimenting with right away and use different threads and feel how the different lengths of needles feel as you're stitching and sewing. My favorite happened to be called Betweens. Usually for hand sewing, people recommend Sharps needles, but I really like Betweens needles. These are the kind of needles that quilters use for hand quilting, and I find that they are just excellent for really meticulous work like I like to do. And I feel like I can control the needle better than a longer Sharps type of needle. However, I learned that by trial and error. So that's why I recommend you get a set of a variety pack and try the different needles and find which one feels best for you. The other thing is different needles are going to feel different based on the fabric that you're using. And so this is going to give you that opportunity to experiment and try them out. Now, the final tool that we need is thread. Doesn't have to be fancy. If you've got a mending kit and there's a few little pieces of thread in there, you can get started immediately with that. Otherwise, I would just look for an all-purpose thread. My favorite brand right now happens to be Gutermann. I find them really high quality, but just about anything will do right at the beginning. The cheaper you go, the more likely you are to have your thread break and tangle on you. So going kind of middle of the road like a Gutermann or another similar, like going into a sewing store and picking up thread that's clearly a part of their typical display versus using something from a cheap sewing kit or mending kit is going to give you that kind of leg up when it comes to yarn tangling or breaking. But ultimately, it's about getting started, and thread is not going to make or break your small first project. The first bonus optional, semi-optional item that I would like to talk about is the iron. Before you even think about getting a sewing machine, make sure that you have an iron. This is going to make your life so much easier. In my Simple Sewing Skills, I talk about why a little bit and show you how to use it to make your life a little bit easier as you're sewing. But it's not completely necessary to start your sewing journey, but it is something that's really going to help you. And quite frankly, you or your mom probably has one. So this is not a particularly fancy iron that I have. I just picked it up at Aldi, honestly, on sale. I like it because it releases from the base. Let's see if I can get my hands right. This one happens to release from the base so that once it's charged, I can iron and the cord doesn't get in my way. But honestly, I didn't buy it for that reason. That just happened to be an added bonus that I find is pretty neat. I have always in the past used irons that are just what I happen to have on hand. I've never gone out and purchased a special iron for sewing. It's always just been the one that's available to me or the one that's on sale when I need to replace something that's broken. So you can keep it really simple when it comes to irons. The next level up item that I recommend is a thimble. This simple little tool will level up your hand sewing like nothing else. This is so underrated, especially in today's day and age. and I highly recommend you learn how to use it. And just find one that fits nicely on your ring finger, or not your ring finger, your tall finger. Find one that fits nicely on your tall finger and doesn't fall off when you're moving around. So it shouldn't be so tight that it's uncomfortable. Your finger obviously needs to go in it, so it can't be too tight, so tight that your finger doesn't fit, but you also want it to be snug enough that you can move around and not worry about it falling off. Usually when thimbles are being sold in the store, they are packaged in such a way that you can try them on, or at least they have a little circle that you can stick your finger into to find which size is likely the best for you. Now we are finally coming to the sewing machine. Why did I wait so long to talk about the sewing machine? Well, like I said at the beginning, you want to be sure that you love this hobby before investing both the time and the money in a sewing machine and learning how to use it. So I would recommend before getting a sewing machine that you level up in all of the other areas first, and then get your sewing machine. And then it'll be special and exciting at a whole new level. It's going to be amazing for you. So, what to look for in your first sewing machine? Number one, don't go for a toy machine. Go for an actual sewing machine. You can still get budget machines, especially if you look secondhand. Look for a good brand in an older model when you're looking for something secondhand, and be clear that it works, or know where you're going to take it for a tune-up. Don't try to do any kind of tuning up yourself at this stage. I wouldn't recommend it. So you want to make sure that it works, because the last thing you want to do is get frustrated constantly because something about the machine is off, and then you're blaming yourself, thinking that it's your fault. Make sure that the machine works well if you're getting it secondhand. Look for a brand like Viking or Janome, or a Brother machine is another good brand, very inexpensive. Berninas are one of my favorites, and Fafs are both high-end machines. So look for something that's solid when you're looking for a machine. It should have some weight to it. It shouldn't, it should stick to the table. And one of the reasons you want that is because you don't want it jiggling and shaking all over the place while you're sewing. You're going to learn that very quickly if you use a cheap machine that has plastic interior build. This particular Janome is actually really affordable, brand new. And that's because they keep it simple. It's a simple build. It's all metal inside, so it has that weight and it has that durability when it comes to the inner pieces not bending or breaking very easily. But you just have your basic sewing stitches, nothing fancy, nothing computerized, and quite frankly, you don't need that yet. Right now, you need to spend maybe less than $100 if you find a machine secondhand. This one tends to be somewhere right around the $200 mark, less if you can find it on sale. I've seen it on sale at Joann's. I've seen it on sale and regular price on Amazon. So this is something that you can find fairly easily for a pretty affordable price, and know that you're getting a really solid machine. I hope what I've shared in this video today helps you save both time and money as you embark on this sewing journey. If you want links to anything that I've mentioned throughout this video, the links are in the description, and that includes my Simple Sewing Skills book, which is free for download, and that'll take you through all of the steps from threading your needle and tying a knot in the end, detailed instructions on those two items, all the way through to completing your first sewing project. If you do sew a project using my Simple Sewing Skills book, I would love to see it. So leave me a comment, send me a message, post on social, and tag me. I would love to see what you make and encourage you on this wonderful sewing journey that you are embarking on now.